My father proposed to me on my 16th birthday. Yes, you heard that right. My biological father got on one knee with a ring and asked me to marry him. 16th birthday is supposed to be sweet, unforgettable celebration, marking a transition into young adulthood. For me, however, my 16th birthday became memorable for entirely different reasons. The day began with the aroma of vanilla and strawberries wafting through the house. My ever-diligent planner mother had spent the early hours in the kitchen preparing a lavish breakfast. She believed in starting special days with a touch of culinary magic. My birthday was no exception. "Happy birthday, Lydia," she exclaimed as I descended the staircase, still rubbing sleep from my eyes. The table was set with a feast, fluffy pancake topped with fresh berries, scrambled eggs and crispy bacon, all accompanied by a tall glass of freshly squeezed orange juice. "Thanks, Mom," I replied, a smile tugging at the corners of my lips. Her excitement was infectious, and despite the early hours, I felt a bubble of joy rising within me. "Your father will be down soon," she said, her voice a mixture of fondness and something else I couldn't quite place. "He has a special surprise for you today." A special surprise? Those words danced around in my mind as I ate, wondering what he could possibly have planned. My father, Edward, was a man of few words and even fewer surprises. He was a stern figure, often wrapped up in his work, but it seems today was an extraordinary exception. After breakfast, I found myself in the living room, my mother bustling about in the kitchen, cleaning up for the morning feast. I picked up the book I had been reading, an old mystery novel I found in the attic, settled into the couch. "Lydia," my father's voice startled me. I looked up to see him standing in the doorway holding a small wrapped gift box. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," he said and stepped forward to hand me the box. "Thanks, Dad," I replied, taking the box and unwrapping it carefully. Inside was a delicate gold ring. It was beautiful and my breath caught in my throat, looking up at him. "I'm glad you like it," he said, his voice softer than usual. "There is something I want to talk to you about." Before I could respond, my mother entered into the room, drying her hand on a dish towel. She looked between the two of us. Her expression is unreadable. "Why don't we all sit down?" my father suggested. "Lydia," he began, "you are 16 now, and there are things we need to discuss, decisions that need to be made." I felt a knot form in my stomach. What could it possibly mean? My mother reached over and took my hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "You see," my father continued, "our family has a certain tradition, obligations that have been passed down through generations. One of these involves marriage." Marriage? The word echoed in my mind, a confusing mix of curiosity and dread. "What are you talking about, Dad?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. He took a deep breath. "Lydia, our family believes in keeping bloodline pure, in maintaining our legacy. To do this, we have a tradition arranged marriage within the family." My heart pounded in my chest. This couldn't be happening. Not in this day and age, you mean? I couldn't even finish the sentence. "Yes," he said, his voice firm. "I'm proposing marriage to you, Lydia. It is our duty to uphold this tradition." I felt like my heart was gonna come out of my chest and the ground should open up and swallow me. My mother squeezed my hand harder, but her eyes were filled with tears. "No," I whispered, shaking my head. "This can't be real. You can't be serious." "I'm very serious," my father said. "This is what our family requires." The rest of the day passed in a blur. I felt like I was walking through a nightmare, unable to wake up. My mother's comforting presence was the only thing keeping me grounded. That evening, I retreated into my room, the ring he had given me lying discarded in my dresser. I couldn't bear to look at it. How could a gift meant to symbolize love and affection be tainted by such proposition? Few minutes later, there was a knock on my door. My mother entered, her face looking so pale and sad. She sat beside me, wrapping her arms around me. "I am sorry, Lydia," she whispered. I never wanted this for you. Then why didn't you stop him? I asked, tears streaming down my face. I tried, she said, her voice breaking, but your father is set in his ways. This tradition is everything to him. Well, it is not everything to me, I said, pulling away. I won't do it. I can't. You don't have to, she said firmly. We will find a way out of it. I promise you. Over the next few days, my mother and I devised a plan. We would start afresh somewhere far away from my father's influence. It was a daunting prospect, but the alternative was unthinkable. We packed what we could carry and made arrangements to leave in the dead of the night. My mother had some savings stashed away, enough to get us started in a new place. The night of our escape, my heart raced with a mixed feelings of fear and excitement. We crept through the house, careful not to wake my father. Just as we reached the front door, it opened, and there he stood, his face a mark of fury. Going somewhere? He asked, his voice cold. My mother stepped forward, shielding me with her body. We are leaving, Edward. You can't keep us here. You are not going anywhere, he said, grabbing my mother's arm. Lydia is my daughter. She will honor our traditions. No, I shouted, stepping forward. I won't. You can't make me. He turned his gaze at me, his eyes filled with a strange feelings of anger and sadness. You don't understand, Lydia. This is our way, our duty. It is not mine, I said firmly, and I won't be a part of it. For a moment, we stood in a tense standoff. Then, to my surprise, my father released my mother and stepped aside. Go, then, he said quietly. But know this, if you leave, you can never come back. The night air was cold as my mother and I hurried down the street, our breath visible in the moonlight. The adrenaline coursing through my veins kept me alert, but the fear of being caught loomed over us like a dark cloud. We reached the edge of the town and stopped to catch our breath. We are almost there, my mother whispered, her voice trembling. Suddenly, we saw a headlight in the darkness. A car screeched to an halt in front of us. My father was unmistakable as he stepped out, his expression a mix of fury and determination. Get in the car, he ordered, his voice cold and unyielding. Edward, please, my mother pleaded. Let us go. You know I can't do that, he replied, grabbing my arms. This is your home, Lydia. You can't just leave. I struggled against his grip, but he was too strong. Defeated, we were forced back into the car. Our escape attempt failed. Back at the house, my father locked us in my room, posting guards in front of the door. My mother and I sat in silence, the weight of our failure pressing down on us. I am so sorry, Lydia, my mother said, tears streaming down her face. I thought we could make it. It is not your fault, Mom, I replied, hugging her tightly. We will find another way. Days turned into weeks, and my father kept a close watch on us, ensuring we had no opportunity to escape. The oppressive atmosphere of the house weighed heavily on me, but I refused to give up hope. With no other option, I decided to reach out to my grandmother, my father's mother. She lived in a small cottage in the outskirts of the town, and I hoped she might have the influence to help us. One evening, I managed to slip a letter to one of the guards, bribing him with the last of my savings. The note was simple, a desperate plea for help. Dear Grandma, please help us. Father has gone too far. We need to get away. Can you do anything? Love, Lydia. That was the content of the letter. We could only pray that she would receive it and come to our aid. A week later, my grandmother arrived at the house, her face stern, showing no hint of emotion. She demanded to see my father, and the two of them disappeared into his study. I waited anxiously, my heart pounding in my chest. After what felt like an eternity, my grandmother emerged. Her expression was unreadable. Lydia, come here, she called, her voice firm. I approached her hesitantly, my mother at my side. Your father and I have spoken, she said. While I don't agree with his method, this is our family's tradition. My heart sank at her words. My grandmother's presence, which I had hoped would be a beacon of salvation, seemed instead to be reinforcing the prison I was trapped in. My mother's gripped my hand, tightening it, and I could feel a silent plea for strength. "Grandma, please," I implored, tears welling up in my eyes. "This isn't right. I don't want to be married to my father. This tradition is wrong." She regarded me with a long contemplative look. "Lydia, there are many things in life we cannot understand, especially at your age. The tradition of our family have kept us strong for generations. However, I do see that you are suffering." My mother spoke up, her voice shaking. "Is there nothing you can do? We just want Lydia to have a normal life, free from this." Days passed with no sign of change. My father continued his daily routines. His demeanor was implacable as ever. My grandmother stayed with us, her presence a constant reminder of the complex family dynamic at play. One night, my mother and I decided to try escaping again. This time, we planned to leave during the changing of the guards, hoping the brief moment of reduced vigilance would give us the window we needed. We crept through the house, our footsteps silent on the thick carpet. Just as we reached the back door, a shadow loomed over us. It was one of the new guards, a younger man who seemed more alert than the others. "Where do you think you are going?" he demanded. My mother tried to reason with him, but his loyalty to my father was clear. Within minutes, we were once again standing in front of my father, his expression a mix of disappointment and anger. "I warned you," he said. "There will be consequences for this." He restricted our movement even further, forbidding us from leaving our rooms except under strict supervision. Our meals was brought to us and our interaction with the outside world were completely cut off. The atmosphere in the house had shifted drastically since our second escape attempt. My father's patience had worn away completely. One evening, as I sat alone in my room, the door suddenly burst open. My father stood in the doorway, his face twisted in anger. Without a word, he strode towards me. He raised his hand. I tried to back away, but there was nowhere to go. "You think you can defy me?" he growled, his voice low and dangerous. "You belong to this family and you will do as you are told." His hand came down hard, striking me across the face. The impact sent me spiraling on the floor, my vision blurred in tears. I tasted blood in my mouth but beat down hard. Refusing to cry out, he hit me again, each blow a reminder of my powerlessness. I tried to protect myself, raising my arms to shield my face, but it was no use. He was relentless, his blows raining down on me until I felt like I couldn't breathe. Finally, he stopped. "The next time you try running, it will be worse." He spat before turning and leaving the room, slamming the door behind him. I lay on the floor, bruised and battered, my body aching from the beating. My mother rushed in moments later, her face pale with fear. She helped me to my feet, her hands shaking as she tried to comfort me. "We will find a way out of this, Lydia," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "I promise you we will." The days that followed were filled with tense silence. My father's presence loomed over us like a dark cloud. I spent most of my days in the room, trying to stay out of his way. My mother and I spoke in hushed tones. Our conversations was filled with plans for escape that seemed increasingly futile. One evening, I heard my father's heavy footstep approaching my room. My heart pounded in my chest as the door swung open. He stood there, his eyes blazing with anger. "You will learn to obey," he said, his voice cold and menacing. Before I could react, he grabbed my arms and yanked me on the bed. I tried to pull away, but his grip was ironclad. He shoved me against the bed, his hand raised to strike me again. This time I couldn't stay silent. "No!" I screamed, my voice breaking. "I won't let you do this." I kicked him as hard as I could. The surprise on his face was quickly replaced by a fury. He struck me hard across the face, sending me crashing on the floor. "You will regret this," he snarled, his voice filled with venom. The beating that followed was even worse than the first. He hit me repeatedly, his blows fueled by rage. I tried to defend myself, but it was like fighting against a storm. Every time I raised my arm, he would knock them aside, his fists connecting with my body. When he finally left, I was left lying on the floor, my body bruised and battered. On this very day, I could only wish I was never born.